Roster move that I find quite intriguing for many reasons, actually. PR heading back to MOUZ, and I say heading back, part of the academy team. There's other teams out there who can overtake them.
No, I'm actually going to disagree with you on this one. Here's why. Right, we're back with counterpoints. Obviously, there haven't been any matches except some smaller tournaments. We're still in the post-major, Roster Mania, player break type scenario. By the way, if you're actually interested in the fact there are tournaments during the player break and what that could mean, there's an episode of The Four Horsemen on the other LFN channel that you can check out where we have Bessie also on and we discuss generally, again, sort of what's going on in CS. That's more the details we discuss. So, where do you want to start, Pimp? In theory, we could go anywhere. There's roster moves, there's all sorts of things, right?
Yeah.
What do you want to discuss?
Yeah, I think we can start with a roster move that I find quite intriguing for many reasons, actually. PR heading back to MOUZ, and I say heading back, part of the academy team previously played in Game
I believe it's also implied, by the way, that much like Shu here, I believe what they do in MOUZ is everyone, when they go to the first team after, it's like you have a buyback clause.
Yeah.
It's almost similar to how certain things are structured in sports, but I think a lot of people have missed that, mate, because as far as I know, that's how they've gotten pretty much all these guys back.
Yeah. And I think that's smart business first and foremost, especially in esports where everything is a bit immature. Organizations are still learning, how to work that out. But I think that's smart first and foremost. I find it interesting for a lot of different reasons. Now you could talk about PR, to MOUZ, the player, will it have an impact, etc. But I want to start with, is he even their first choice? Because I think you're right in saying that they probably had a buyback clause in place for PR, and I would assume the price is not too big, I don't think PR lately has raised his stock value. He hasn't really been playing that well, and during the major he was struggling a bit more than you thought. And there's been a couple of scenarios where PR has had a better stock value at a current point, leading up to now. But I was under the impression that JL was, probably the guy heading into MOUZ. So I'm curious, was this JL, not being allowed to leave Na'Vi at a fair, reasonable price? Is he out of a contract now, or did he request too much from MOUZ? Did they not like what they saw when he played with him? Because I feel like what I saw from JL and MOUZ and the way all the players spoke about him, would love to work with JL, and they kind of hinted that it was a question whether or not MOUZ could figure out the contract scenario with Na'Vi or the contract scenario with JL. So I'm curious to hear your take. If you even think, from what we know from the outside, the PR is the first option for MOUZ, or if that was the second option that they decided to go with.
Okay, all right, here's what's interesting. I actually have, and sometimes I do have the odd piece of info. To be fair, I will say this. You can sort of use this as a pattern, guys. When I go out of my way to say I have no behind-the-scenes information, this is pure speculation, that just actually is true. I'll never lie about that. But even though you won't be, sadly, no one's capable of doing this, but if you ever were in a court or something, that does mean if you go back and check on some of the other ones, if I don't say that, I might actually know a rumour behind the scenes, or there might just be some sort of thing. So here's the problem. There's two types of rumours in esports. The type that gets to the leak tweets where they're just random people none of us know. Those actually are just the ones that you just have to vaguely be in the industry. So those ones I would say take with a massive grain of salt. That's probably more listen, they're usually not totally fake, but they're more the classic one. Someone knows the practice server and he refreshed it and he saw someone in there. Maybe not even the actual player, by the way, but someone tagged as that player. So they go, ooh, is this team looking at this guy? And that just might mean you played a scrim, or even worse, it might just be he stood in for a scrim because, he's mates with another player and then they had time off, or you used to play for the team and you just got... So anyway, right, I haven't got any of those. There's actually, for me, no inside info at all on this one, but I will just say this, based on what I've seen, and then listen, here's where I can almost come to this, is I actually think the order of how they did things with JL actually implies he was just a stand-in. I don't actually personally think that means they were going to use him as the real thing, and it's just that Na'Vi wouldn't let him go. I mean, if you see, basically he's gone from Na'Vi now anyway, it's over. Yeah. If anything, if anyone offers you anything at that point, mate, you take it. And the reason why here's where I do actually have a little bit of inside information. Here's where it's only actually from the Na'Vi side, Pimp. The reason I would speculate that I don't actually think MOUZ were in love with JL and wanted to use him is, one thing, I will never say what they said because I always protect my sources and I'll never say who it is. But all I'll say is this. I was actually low-key shocked when I talked to some of the Na'Vi people about how they thought about JL, because I wondered if they would see him like the community, and a lot of us experts do. Because remember, if you're not in the team, you can't really know who said what in the game, who was told to do what the plan was. Basically, all I'll say is this. It seemed to me like Na'Vi people were way lower on JL, even when he was in their team, bro, and they were in all those finals than we are. I mean, I did used to think back then, I don't think I would ever said he was their best player. I always thought that was bit, but I would have said but I used to say it back then. For me, he was in that category. I also put Sun Pius in, where it's like, you don't have to be the best at your role. Like, I call you like big game player, or in his case, like impact player, because I just think how many times in 2024 he would just win those like 1vx's, or he would just have like a big map when it was a big time in the playoffs. Like, that's actually pretty rare in Counter-Strike. So I've got to say, I probably actually valued him higher than it seems like some of the Na'Vi people did. And I just get the sense in the community, actually, a lot of the other players seem more on this Na'Vi side of the equation, mate. It's why, if you notice, you haven't really seen him even in the public rumours. Think about all the teams we've seen, all this shit. We've even seen crazy suggestions like Aurora's going to be Lexi B and Molotov, like some nuts shit, like what? Like top tit. So I haven't heard anything like that. I haven't seen anything like that about Gel. So that makes me think actually it was probably more something like he was just available and he's like a generic rifle and they just thought, right, we'll take him to this event because he's doing it. The joke is something doing event work. Like he's available for hire. He's obviously wants to be in CS still. People don't know. I think he even streamed a decent bit like this year. But the problem is I never saw it personally as like he's the addition. And I will say this, because I think actually MOUZ might even have been the first episode I did of that show I do with Los Raposa, where it's called Roster Mechanic, and we break down all like stats angles and sort of see like basically it's using advanced statistics modeling to see things like who plays what role and how do they interconnect in the game. It's actually quite interesting if you're someone for football, by the way, because that's basically all football is now. Like even fans know all the things like I switched from the 6 to the 8 and he's like that's actually thing. When I was a boy, mate, there was none of that. It was all just generic stuff. Get up the field, cross the ball in. And the problem is in the modern day, a lot of us actually do basically still make teams like that. Like I always joke that some of the Liquid roster moves on paper looked good to me, but then when I look with some of this data, I'm like, oh, that never could have worked because actually you had like two players who were the same player, or you had the equivalent to a striker with no setup man, so he has no service. Like, what do you want? So the problem is basically one of the reasons why I actually thought that MOUZ standing lineup wouldn't even do well, actually did slightly better than I expected, was basically he was coming in, not technically necessary to take Impact's roles, because I assume they shuffled it around a little bit, but usually when you're the standing and you're not certain, you do get whatever's left over. And all I'll say is he was totally inappropriately put to fill any of Impact's roles. Like, it's unironically, Impact is literally the meme of like the CT side, you get the worst spot on every single map. And so if you actually don't realise, the craziest thing about Impact, by the way, is technically, even though we all dissed him, that should really only be for the T side. Actually on CT side, if you ever saw the spots he was taking, mate, he wasn't actually bad. Because if you ever look, he had essentially zero resources and had like all right numbers. So I will just say, so also that suggests to me, I imagine MOUZ also know that's not what they needed in GL. So the thing that's weird for me is this one, is I actually think you're right. Even though obviously the rumour was already that this guy came to the team last year and then it led to that interview early this year where it actually made him sound like he's bombed out. It sounds like he got tricked by it or whatever. Because he basically sort of implies like he saw the rumours but then no one contacted him or something, or they didn't try and make a move for him. And here's the problem I have, right? I actually think people are missing this detail, right? I looked it up now. PR is only 18 right now, Pimp.
Yeah.
Right now, not like last year or, at the beginning of 2020. So what I'll say, I'll just throw this out there right now. I actually do think those two things are connected, mate, because I'm sure you would think the same thing as me. If this was last year, that looked like a slam dunk signing. In fact, I think PR is one of the people, by the way, that got Ash into Aurora. Because if you think, when he got PR, that just made you think, like, how many guys has this person scouted? Like, he just gets them from, like, tier 3 or 4, because that's the cool thing about Ash. Obviously, there's a massive market now for up-and-coming players, so he could never even get, mate, some of the players people want you now. He wouldn't, someone like a Modest, he would never even have been in the market for someone like that. Someone who's the guaranteed, Kiyosuke. Ash can't pick players like that. He really has to pick the player where no one else has yet noticed that this is like the next guy, It's one of the reasons why actually, last year I also credited, even though now maybe he's done a sus job, the Fnatic GM when he got Matisse or Matouche or whatever you say. Again, I heard from so many people like a month after they got him into Fnatic, like, oh, now, yeah, this guy's really good. What the hell? Like, how did we not notice it? But it's like, yeah, but he got to him first. So what I will say is this. I actually do think last year that this was a move you should definitely consider, especially if you've got this clever buyback detail. Because if you notice, this buyback thing, first of all, like you're saying, Pimp, I would imagine it does mean that you can actually buy them back at a discount. Otherwise, you would just make a bid for them anyway. And then secondly, it also seems to me like it's almost like one of those things where maybe in the first place, the reason the buyback exists is you're giving the team that buys him a cheaper price because you have sort of like, in English, we call it like first right of refusal. You get to be the first person, basically, you can sign that player. That's how I think they got Shuhei back after Game of Legion when they made the major final. And then also, I'll just throw this out there. The reason it's clever is it is somewhat akin to the loan system in football that we do, where if you're in the Premier League and you're like a top team, but this guy who's like 18 can't get in your squad, you loan him to like a top championship team, the level below. And then if he shows his skills, you're like, right, I've sort of tested you for free, basically, without putting you in my games. Now I'll bring you back to the squad. It's happened many, many times in history. It's why actually sometimes lesser teams also get to benefit. So first of all, I think that's all really smart business, but I'm with you. I actually don't think that this was their first choice. I think actually the whole reason why they had this scuffed, GL comes to 2 events, then Broline comes back, but not as IGL. I'm sorry, there's no way, Pimp, I think someone sits down and constructs that. It's one thing to take the standings, but in that scenario, you take the standing to the major as well. You know what I mean? Like, there's no way you bring back the former IGL to not do his role, and then because as you saw, it made them completely irrelevant at the major. They were just toothless. So what I will say is this: I actually think the reason why, as a backup, you've gone to this PR angle, I set it up earlier, is actually, you know what? If I hear that sequence of events and it's true, you had a rising talent who made his name on, like, you know, let's say a tier 1.5 team last year, and then he thought he was getting called up to his old squad, basically, where he's already like worked with them. He was in their academy system. It's even the obvious place to go back to. You know, there's a clause where they can get you anytime they want. If you're 18 years old, he might even have been 17 at the time. I'm not sure what his birthday is. And then you're told, like, yeah, actually, mate, there never was a deal or what. Yeah, that would fucking kill your confidence. It just would. Like, I'm sorry, that's a totally... even though you wouldn't want it to be true, I could totally understand that. A lot of people... I'll tell you a random detail I don't think I've ever said on this show to you, Pimp. I actually have a theory that I've come up with on other shows that people love, which is from knowing pro players... Not only, first of all, are a lot of them like shy, nerdy guys who aren't super social and aren't very mature anyway, but I always make the point, how could they be? They just spent the last 5 to 6, in the case of models, 10 years before they become a pro, just sat on a PC, just play video games. Like, you know those stats where it's like Donk has spent like a quarter of his life in CS? Yeah, well, I'm sorry, then that's why Donk, for example, even me, who was pretty weird at age 18, the difference is at age 18, I would have had like 10 times the social interaction of Donk, and I'm a weirdo. So like Donk in that scenario, yeah, he's going to be godlike at CS, but he's going to be very actually immature probably in a lot of life scenarios. And so my rule is, whenever you see an age in esports, just take 5 off it. You've probably got a more reasonable number. I think that's even quite fair, because if you ever look at it, if someone's 18, that actually means he's more like a 13-year-old kid, mate. If you think in sports, like, that is the person who do something stupid or say something silly on social media or fucking get into a fight with someone at an event. You wouldn't expect a normal 18-year-old, because we think of that as that you're an adult. You should be. So I would say, I actually think that actually the two things are combined. I think that was something that took a hit to his confidence and crushed his level a bit. And then also, let's be real, I do think that might have crushed his level. And then let's add in, Game of Legion also just got way worse anyway. It wasn't just him. Like, they actually did just drop off a cliff. It looked like when the Ash effect stopped, like the more months away they were from Ash, it just got worse and worse and worse and became somewhat irrelevant until basically they did this remix right at the end of the season. And by the way, that was just a flash in the pan anyway. And they went back to being a bit crap. So what I would say is this. I actually think that's also why, though, if you're MOUZ, I don't hate this gamble. Because my logic would be, he's really young. Maybe there even was a roommate, just never was something they acted on last year. We're bringing him in. If anything, if it really was us that killed his confidence, then let's just fix that. Let's just bring him in now. Here's the problem I have, Pimp. I say all that to do all the, like, you know, the social elements, the politics. My problem is this, though. I don't understand the roles in this team now, Pimp. They don't make any sense to me. I'll give you a reason why. First of all, if you think about like aggressive riflers in the team, right? You already had Exertion, who used to be the dude who would have the whole game based around. You had him. Zelex, who's also really young that they've just brought up. He played as a star in the MOUZ Academy team. And then you got PR, who to me, at one point was the star of Game Legion. That's just people with similar sort of roles. Let's forget that you got Spinks there, mate, who I think is the best player. And I can tell you, if he was a striker, mate, he's not the one who goes past it when you feel it. He's the one who's calling for the ball every time and putting his hands up when you don't get it. Like, there's too many stars in this team, or too many people who have played star roles. So my concern actually isn't even like, will PR be any good? It's like, I actually don't know how this roster works. It's one of those ones where on paper, again, like 10 years ago, this is spicy. Like, there's some skill in this roster, but I don't know how it works personally. Yeah. This makes me actually a bit sus about MOUZ's future.
That's the cool thing about this move, though, because I think there's so much to digest. I think first and foremost, you're right in saying that, you know, he's only 18 years of age. You know, that's kind of what I was trying to lure you into as well. You know, the fact that I think based on his recent performances, based on how he did at the major, and also, you know, as you said, based on how he reacted to, I think it actually was G2. He was rumored to go to G2.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yes, sure.
One of the breaks, and then it didn't happen. And I don't know if that was just a rumor or it was close to happening, or if they just considered whatnot. You know, but he even came out publicly saying that there was tough tough to deal with. He felt he was on his way out. So something suggests to me that there must have been a form of contact. Maybe they explored it, maybe they talked to him, maybe they even negotiated a contract, and then G2 decided not to do it, or Gamer Legion and G2 couldn't figure it out, or MOUZ, stopped the move, saying that, well, we're maybe going to swoop in and come get him in half a year's time. So I think first and foremost, that's interesting to me. So I'll give him a bit of leeway as well. I think, as you said, like the way you summarized it, it's worth the gamble if you're MOUZ. I think PR could be a potential star in the future. I think he has the abilities, and he's shown before that when he's on it, when he's confident, when he's getting the roles that he desires to play, especially when Ash was in Gamer Legion, spent an awful lot of time setting him up. I even spoke to Ash a little bit during Cologne when he was working with me as a co-analyst, and he said, PR is a guy that you need to set up, and PR is a great talent, PR is a great player, and he thought and spoke highly of PR. So I think there's some legitimacy to how well he performed when he was 17 years of age, which is why it's worth the gamble when you're 18. But I also very much agree with what you kind of highlighted here, the second part of your speech, the fact that now MOUZ have changed direction completely. Because the thing that we had to deal with a year and a half ago, it was us, having to come to terms with MOUZ. Historically speaking, they've always been a bit of a farmer team. They've always been a bit of a team that, quote unquote, got the cheap solutions. They would never break the bank to sign a big player. A year and a half ago, when Jimfed re-signed his contract with MOUZ, that's when MOUZ came out and basically said, okay, we signed Spinks, we re-signed Jimfed as well. We spent an awful lot of money making sure that we would, have a very competitive lineup, and we spent an awful lot of money saying to the rest of the world that, okay, our ambitions is no longer being MOUZ, where we are happy or satisfied being 8th to 10th in the world. Like, they were breaking the bank to re-sign the contract with Jimfed. They were breaking the bank and paid an awful lot of money for Spinks. Signings and moves they wouldn't have done, a couple of years earlier. So that was a new looking MOUZ. And I even spoke to one of the MOUZ guys as well, saying that, I think you need to reconsider how you look at us in the landscape of Counter-Strike. We're no Vitality, but we're just below them, right? We're willing to spend money. We're willing to invest into our lineup. They were the second best team, third best team in the world for almost a year straight, so they were up there. I feel with this move, though, with PR, I personally think it's worth the gamble, because I really do think PR has something unique to him. I think he's a great player, and I think it's also tough for an 18-year-old to be, quote-unquote, stuck in Gamer Legion. If you're then being rumored to G2, you're being rumored to MOUZ, you could play for a better team, to stay motivated, to stay on top of your game, even though that's what you're supposed to do when you're a young talent, it can be difficult. You're playing with a new in-game leader, then Ash leaves the team. As I understood it, they have a great relationship, so he constantly had to accept that he was playing in, let's say, Ajax in football, right? And while everyone else is moving on to bigger teams or new projects, he's the one staying, and he's the one getting stuck. So it was a little bit, iffy for him at the later portions, but I think he's worth the gamble in the sense that I think he has something unique. I think he could be a great player. My issue is, as you said as well, it's then back to what MOUZ were before. This is not a major signing for MOUZ. This is not them breaking the bank, going out and acquiring a big talent, or investing a lot of money into the team, saying we believe in Exertion as an in-game leader. We believe in Torsey. We believe that if we sign the right player to support Spinks, Exertion, and Torsey together with Celix coming in as a young prospect, we can then again be a top 3 team in the world. To me, this is and that's nothing against PR. It's a budget signing. It's a signing where you're not wasting too much money. You're taking a bit of a gamble, and if it doesn't work out, it probably wasn't too expensive. So that changes that whole narrative in the way we attack MOUZ anymore. Like, they're not supposed to be a top 4 team with that signing. They're supposed to be maybe a contender for it. And if PR works out and the gamble works out, then we can have a conversation about it. But it's not them splashing money out of the window saying, we're here to stay. Like, we're here to back up Exertion. We're bringing in a player that we know can work with him. Like, let's say they were to re-sign Frozen or something, acquire him to the lineup. That's a blockbuster signing where you're saying, okay, we believe in Exertion, we believe in the core of the lineup, and if we add a guy like Frozen to it, we can once again be the second best, third best, fourth best team in the world. So that one portion of it changes how I view MOUZ and maybe the strategic investment for MOUZ. The other one is, as you said as well, the roles. You're now having a team where the in-game leader has been an in-game leader for a couple of months, 3 months. And I like Exertion. I think he can become a good in-game leader. I think he takes an awful lot of inspiration from Apex. But I'll also say it like this. You can count on one hand how many aggressive riflers has made the transition into becoming a great in-game leader after 6 months. Electronic did it fine the first 6 months, but then you have to develop your own, I guess, career as an in-game leader, your own identity. You're getting anti-strat. Your first round of ideas are running out. Now you have to reinvent yourself from tournament to tournament, and maybe you need a bit of a break because it was easier just being an anti-fragger where you just flash for me, I'm going to run in. Now you have to think for everyone at all times, not even in official games, but also in practice. You're way more involved in the preparation. The workload is just much bigger when you're an in-game leader. So I can count on one hand, probably a couple of fingers, how many aggressive aggressive riflers have made the transition into becoming a great in-game leader over time. So I'm not too sure about Exertion. I liked him as a player and as an individual. I don't think we got to see the best of him at all times in MOUZ. Maybe he can become a great in-game leader, but that's a question mark to me. Then you add in PR, a bit of a gamble, bit of a question mark. I tend to agree that he's worth the gamble, but there's no guarantees. Celix, sure, he's shown promise, but he's also young, immature, inexperienced, and all of a sudden you have a team where 3 of the elements in the team are inexperienced in their roles, and you're telling me you want a team to be, let's say, top 5, top 4. Is that the expectations we're putting on you? I won't. I don't think MOUZ is going to be a top contender. I don't think MOUZ is going to compete against the likes of Vitality, Spirit, Falcons, maybe not even Na'Vi and Furia at the moment, consistently, because I think there's too much inexperience. I think this is a rebuild of MOUZ. This is an investment into the future, but I think it's very important to note, at least from my expectations and from the people out there, the MOUZ of 2025, that were the second best team in the world, is not going to be the MOUZ of 26 or the beginning of 27. This is a rebuild. This is them investing into the future. It's them taking a couple of gambles. It's them probably making sure that the wage bill is not as high as it could have been had you signed JL, as an example, or had you gone for another player. So it's a bit of a calculated risk. It's a bit of a calculated move, but that also tampers my expectations when it comes to MOUZ. I don't consider them to be a top 5 team. I don't expect them to be a top 5 team. And if they can be, then that means that the PR gamble worked out. That means that Exertion is performing better than I initially would think as an in-game leader. And that means Celix is performing better than I initially would think. But that's 3 things that has to go up at the same time and has to work out at the same time. And I'll be honest, experience is not everything in Counter-Strike, but it does matter, especially when you're MOUZ, when you have Twistzz and Exertion, who were used to, at certain times be quote-unquote crumblers on the stage, etc. So they had their own demons to face. So are they the right personnel to teach the new guys coming into it? Is Exertion, is he going to be the full-fitted in-game leader and ready for those big tasks ahead of him already by now? I don't think so. So I like the move on PR in isolation, but I think MOUZ have taken a step back from being a team that I thought could be top 5, for the future as well, to now in a bit of a rebuilding phase, and then maybe for the future they get into that conversation again.
I'll go you one further. I actually think this is why I'm actually really concerned about MOUZ. What's sad is I actually liked that 2025 team. I'm with you. I always thought not only were they actually like here's the thing. I didn't really myself put too much weight in they don't win that many trophies. My issue was never that. I could make the obvious comparison to what happened yesterday in the World Cup. It's not that you lose. Losing's fine. No one wants to see you crumble though. Crumbling's the worst shit ever, because that's what drains your soul. What's the point in even believing in someone when they do that? So really the problem they had is why a lot of us actually here's why Cyclone doesn't get, we were almost giving him a compliment. If we're saying his team choked all the time, we're actually saying they were capable of winning. By the way, we don't actually know if they were. We'll never know that now, sadly, because it's been and gone, hasn't it? So my issue is this. I actually think they might not even be top 10. I think it's possible they can drop out, because you look at some of the roster moves, you think, by the way, a couple of teams have even waited for a roster move probably till the end of the year. So true, I guess you can say one team might drop, Fury might just drop out because you can down Moldoil might leave. That might happen. But on the other ones, I look at a lot of teams that are sort of angling to get into the top 10. I think this could be a team that's 11th or 12th. It could be in the position of, I'll give you the comparison, what Mongols was last season, where they can get the odd win. And by the way, they beat a lot of the lower teams, but they're not relevant to win the title. And if you saw them in a playoff bracket, you'd never be scared. So sadly, I wonder if that'll happen to MOUZ, because I agree with you, by the way. This is actually the key point. Each move in isolation you can do. You can do Exertion, IGL swap. You can do bring Zelix up, promote him. You can do bring in PR, who's not playing well, but you think he can be good, and it was due to some drama that he didn't come in. But here's my problem. You can't do all 3 at the same time. One thing I hate about this is, I'll even just isolate the obvious one, is the IGL swap. If I do an IGL swap, I want to keep everything else the same, because then I'll have a sense. It's called A/B testing. I want to see what's different when he's the IGL. You'll never know now, because the second he became IGL, you brought in a stand-in, then you had Brolin come back, now you got an 18-year-old come back, there's another one for 4, I think Alex might even be 17. What are we doing? At that point in time, here's the one dark thing I'll say as well. I actually think the move that then becomes the hardest to evaluate is the IGL swap. So let's say it ends up being that PR and Zelix fail for whatever reason. It might just be that his Exertion was never a good IGL, but we'll take a whole year and a half to figure that out. It'll take a fucking while. So I'm with you. I think that's a sus-ass move. Anyway, let's move on. So we actually have some of the old Polymarkets back. So we have, obviously, if you go to Polymarket, they've got the prop section here where they do things like who's going to win a tournament. Will they add a map? There's even a mad one here. Will a FaZe member come out as furry? Because there was that stupid picture of Brokey. So people made that as a gag. But I thought this was a fun one, actually, in light of the conversations we have on this show. There's one that says, by December 31st, 2026, so the end of this year, will ZywOo reach 36 HLTV MVPs? I looked it up now. He is on 30 32, so he would have to win 4 more in this second season. Now, at the moment, the traders, unsurprisingly, have that quite low chance. They're saying it's not going to happen. They're saying it's only 11%. At one point, it was a lot higher because this was all the way back in May. So in May, it was almost like 50%. It was like, in fact, at one point, it was 52% very early on. But obviously, I imagine people have been rocked by Vitality losing the Falcons. Also, they had their tournament before where they lost to IEM Atlanta. So even though you can put in some, some circumstances and context, I think a lot of people, by the way, just go on, it's called recency bias. They go off recent form, they go off what's happening recently. And it's because at the moment, even though it's only like about a month and a half ago, guys, your brain doesn't tell you Vitality's the dominant team and they're going to win tournaments. People are saying, oh, what does Pimp think? Does he get 4 MVPs? Obviously, 4's a lot, but it's ZywOo, bro. He could do it. Does he get 4 MVPs in the second season?
He could, but I don't think he will. And I think it's actually a good one right there, because I think the 11% chance is quite spot on as where I would put it. I think it's very likely. It's not very likely, actually. It's a lie. It can happen. You can never count out ZywOo. You can never count out the fact that Vitality could come in and dominate the second portion of the scene. But my prediction, my whole thought of how the second half of this season is going to go is that we're going to have an even field of teams. We're going to have a Falcons that's going to be competitive. We're going to have a Spirit who ramped it up, who are going to be competitive. We're going to have a Vitality who are still going to be a great team, but they're not going to be as dominating as they were and have been the past year. Fury, a bit of a question mark. Na'Vi, a bit of a question mark. Let's see if they do make any roster changes. Neither of the two. I don't expect Fury to do, but I think Na'Vi is still maybe debating whether or not that's the right thing to do. So I think it'll be, personally, I think it'll be a little bit more diverse in who wins the titles. I also do think that, the second portion of this season, as far as I'm aware, if I'm understanding the whole VRS concept correctly, and this is where it gets very technical when you want to do these predictions, I don't think it's as urgent for Vitality to participate in as many tournaments as they did in the beginning of the year. Right. We know that they signed up for a couple of tournaments for the ESL Grand Slam, even a couple of tournaments they would.
I mean, put it this way, as far as I know, someone even said, this is actually something Messi also said on the Four Horsemen episode, he said something like, actually, one of the reasons why some of the roster moves smaller teams are doing don't make sense is basically some of them, if they're too far out of VRS, they can't get in already. Because I think the thing, people forget this is, the invites go out months earlier based on VRS. Yes. So I think based on what you're saying, the idea is if you're Vitality, you must be at the top of VRS, like 1, 2, 3 or something. You already got your invites pretty much for the whole second season. So you don't have to go to every LAN, right? You could skip one if you wanted.
Exactly, and that's got to obviously hurt his chances of making 4 more MVPs. So I think Vitality will be a little bit smarter in planning their calendar, and maybe they'll skip a couple of more events than they didn't do in the beginning of the season because of the ESL Grand Slam, because of the whole pressure of winning everything leading up to the major. So I'm inclined to say no, but you can't rule it out, which is why I think 11% chances is fair. To be honest, it could be that Vitality comes back. It could be that Falcons just falls off a cliff, because now they finally got the major, and Kerrigan has a bit of a something we haven't discussed, that there's a bit of a history in terms of honeymoon periods and him getting off to good start with new rosters, etc., etc. So if anything, I think what speaks against ZywOo winning all those MVPs is that the rest of the field remains and becomes more competitive, and that's the feeling I have right now. I think Spirit will get better. I think Falcons will stay, competitive. I think Furia, for that matter as well, can win the odd one out. So I think it's going to be tough to win 4, let alone 4 tournaments for Vitality, but having ZywOo being the MVP of all of them as well.
Yeah, the main problem I have with this one is I do think it's totally plausible that he can win, but the key word is more plausible to say that it's not impossible. I do think if you are essentially right now, by the way, the only 2 players you could actually make this about, you can't even say about one season, you can't know how Falcons will do it. It's just Donk and ZywOo. They're the only ones. So in terms of like how they play individually, could do it. Because the reason I say that is they don't actually need their team to be the best. If they make the final, they're also likely to get the MVP because they can just outperform the other person who wins on the other side. Like you imagine if you think an Aurora or something won an event or Fury, actually it can be ZywOo or Donk that wins the MVP though, because they'll be so insane over the rest of the tournament. The problem is, 4 for anyone in any season is still a lot. That's still like for most people the best season of their whole career. Maybe for some of the simple ZywOos, Donks, Cold Zeras get right. That might just be like, they've had like 3 or 4 seasons like that. That's how they all got up in the whole shit. The main issue here is what you said actually about the tournaments. People don't realise there probably will be fewer tournament attendances by Vitality. So when I looked it up on paper, I think he can only guarantee basically that they play like 5 LANs. I looked at what they're invited to and then what they're going to have to play. Well, if they only play 5, to ask him to win MVP at 4 out of 5, I think that's just unreasonable even for the best player, you know what I mean? So here's the sad thing. I do think if you're a really big ZywOo fan, and crucially, if you really believe it was all just a fluke at the major, major, and actually Vitality is still the best team, and no matter what, they will still dominate. I will say the value on an 11% chance is going to be insane. You would make out like a bandit if that happened. Problem I have is, this is why I'll never be a ZywOo hater, bro. I think he'll still get a 2. He might even get 3. Like, I think he's still going to... By the way, he will still get MVPs, in my opinion. The question is just, can he get to 4? I think that's hard, especially because, as you say... But actually, you know what? I'll shade that in as well. If you really believe Vitality that good, you could also consider the notion that maybe there's an event we don't know yet they will attend. And if that does happen, put it this way, it's mainly because it was 5. I don't think 4 out of 5 is reasonable for anyone to expect. If it was 6 or 7, I think I might have said, go for this. I might have said, you know what? If there's anyone I think could do it. Because the one last reason I'll shade in here is this. I do think, no matter what other people think, people are making the mistake. Here's how Vitality's tricked everyone. The first season of this year looked really similar to the first season of last year. It felt the same. Remember, they don't win the Blast Bounty, but then they come on like demons. No one can beat them. They look so unbeatable. They go to the major, but that's where it's different because they didn't win the major. I think winning that major is what made them not even be we don't have to win anymore. It's just that, 1, you get a bit burned out from it, and then 2, you have the thing where it's part of you does have a little bit of a letdown because you're the next. I always think the problem is the couple of tournaments after the major don't have the same build up as the major, so they don't feel quite as important. The difference is if you're Vitality, these do feel important because you want to get back on your perch, as it were. You want to show that you're better. And by the way, if you ever play someone like Falcons, that's like a grudge match now. You want to actually prove that you're better than them and that was just some bullshit Carrigan magic at a major only and that won't apply to normal tournaments. So I don't hate this one. I thought just because it's 11%, I thought there's actually a lot more we could talk about than people would realise on that one. Okay, where we go now, Pimp? What else should we talk about?
Well, that's up to you if you want to do it or not. And it's a question not only for today, but for the rest of the season. Do you think we're going to speak about FaZe at all this season? Do you think FaZe is going to be a team that we are going to see come back into the circuit? Actually qualify, get enough VS points to be invited? And do you think at the end of the day, do you think we're going to have any reason to consider to speak about FaZe in these episodes for the rest of the year? Do you think that team, with where they're heading, with apparently getting to keep Frozen, Twistzz, bringing in J-Bone, etc., is that a team that's even relevant for the rest of the season to you, or do you think that's going to take some time before they even fight their way back into the circuit?
The problem is, as FaZe, no, we'll never discuss them again. I think if this was Hot Take Point, mate, I'd say we'll never in the history of Counter-Strike ever care about FaZe like we did before, because they used to be a team that could win the major, mate. They were a team that was supposed to be winning trophy. I don't think they'll do any of that. Here's the problem I have, though. If you take away the FaZe name and just look at the roster, I actually would, again, if this was a Hot Take show, I actually have that one Hot Take Point made, obviously. I would actually just say the following hot take. This roster will be way better than the last one. I'll give you that. Because, by the way, if people don't know, who knows how they did this? Maybe it was the NKJ guy. That J-Bone guy, mate, how was he sat on the bench of Big or something? Mate, he's actually good. I was watching some of these games at this XEC Power tournament that's been in the off-season. He's actually a legit star quality, mate. Again, at a lower level. We're not playing at tier 1 necessarily on some of those matches. But I already saw right out the gate, and by the way, with a tiny bit of pressure, you are coming into FaZe for fuck's sake. He looks better than Brokey, put it that way. I can give you that immediately. And he actually had some actual pop-off games. So that gives me a little bit of hope. The problem I have, it's the obvious one for me with this move is this. First of all, I've never been sold on that NetU move. I'm so shocked that as far as I can tell, that's one of those ones where other people watch CS differently than me. A lot of people seem to watch CS and they just really remember a 1v1 you won or something like that, and it sticks in their mind. Whereas my problem is I watch the games, but then I also do things like I look at the stats, I look at people's career trajectories, I think about the role they're playing. And so actually it's very easy for me when a player comes in a team and has a good half to go, yeah, I still need to see more than that. I think a lot of people are but that's what he's capable of. So that guy looks like whatever to me. I've never really seen that as a great move. And then the biggest issue for me is sort of like what we discussed earlier. Here's the problem. Because he was forced to do it, I don't believe in Twistzz IGL. What I'm so bored about is this. To be fair, by the way, Twistzz is actually legit enough. I've had conversations with him about his teams and his roles before. He might publicly get a bit salty. He's definitely an emotional guy. And he certainly is a person who, by the way, reads and sees the shit that happens online. But my problem is if I was ever to talk to him face to face, I would tell him straight to his face on a show or privately. I would just say, mate, you ain't cut out to be an IGL. At least, are you ready? Not at this point in your career. I could believe you do it in like 3 years when a bit like Nico, you know your individual game starts to go a little bit. You start thinking about your career. You think to yourself, wait a minute, I've always been involved in the team structure. You know, I've got some good mid rounds going on. My problem is this: I don't believe in the concept of like I'll do it for a while or I'll do that for the moment, coach. That's nonsense. That's not IGLing. There's a reason why Carrigan at this point in time could actually just be a fucking brain in a vat that can't click a mouse. At this point, it looks like you actually could still beat most teams. I don't think you'd win a major if he couldn't literally click the mouse, but I think he could actually 4v5. I'm not trolling. I think he could beat a lot of teams in the top 20 because he just has like the ultimate IGL skills. People like Twistzz don't seem to get it. You don't just get that overnight, mate. That takes years. You said it earlier. Even most of the greatest IGLs ever aren't actually even close to great in the first 6 months. Because the first 6 months, you're just getting your sort of feet wet and you're just figuring out something. And then that's, by the way, that's just getting used to the role. If you want to be on a super high level, I'm sorry, the analogy is good. It is a chess game, mate. When you go head to head with Carrigan, Alexi B, Aper, they aren't just calling a normal match, mate. They aren't just calling a cool mid round. They're like, between them and the coaches, there's so much more going. I'll draw it to the comparison earlier to football. If you just watch the ball or you just watch people taking shots on goal, you would think a lot of teams can win a match. That I can tell you, it is almost in the modern day of football, and I do a lot of betting, bro. It is almost impossible for certain teams to win matches. I'll tell you one of the most boring things of the last like 10 years of football is there's been a million times, bro, where even like the 6th best team in the Premier League was playing Manchester City, and they would get crazy odds. The 6th best team, they'd have like 5-1 odds, Pimp, and I'll tell you what. Do you know how many times I've lost on those? Fucking almost every single one, mate. Because you know how Manchester City was. They never used to drop points, did they? And so I used to think, this is the problem. We're not like 20 years ago. We're not watching La Liga. Like, you don't get random upsets like that at the highest level. So the problem, I think, with people like Twistz is, if he played for, the obvious examples are like Game Allegiant, yeah, it'd be okay to do this experiment. He'd probably be appropriate. But if he ever wants to be back at the phase level, it's not going to be as IGL, mate. I'm sorry, like, you're never going to contend for it. And there's a hot take. You'll never contend for a major as an IGL unless we're talking like 3 years down the line. So that's why I don't believe in this squad, unfortunately. But I actually do think the talent isn't bad. Take out the Netu guy. I think the rest of them are pretty good, actually. I even think, actually, Twistzz, this is why I also don't think he's a real IGL. Oh, I think he'll even frag pretty decently as an IGL still. I don't think he'll drop off and have no hands. And the J Bourne angle's cool. I like to see that. So again, what I'm going to do is this, bro. I'm just going to delete the word phase. And I'm sorry, I'm very cynical on this. I don't even believe in phase. Phase was Carrigan. It just was. It always was. Go watch phase when they didn't have Carrigan, mate, before, when they were just in the online. They were nothing. When they had Nico called it, that was fucking a joke. That was the original phase. You just have good names, but they don't do anything in the server. Like, so you don't have the phase effect. So if instead you replace phase with, I'll give you an example, Astralis, you know what? This isn't a bad lineup then. Let's see it play out. I'm willing to watch it. I could see there being the odd exciting game. I'd be surprised if you ever make a tier 1 semi-final, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, but that's the thing, because I agree with you. I think in isolation, the lineup is all right. It's quite cool, and there's definitely elements to it, but there's elements to it because I still think very highly of Twistzz as an individual player. I agree with you as an in-game leader. He could be utilized better, as a non-in-game leader. If he actually played with a proper in-game leader, I don't think he should be forced into that role unless it's something he truly desires himself and he's willing to dedicate the rest of his career to. Because then, as you said, like, okay, then we can give him a year, and he's had his time in Liquid as well, so he's not completely green in the area, has to catch up to speed, etc., etc. But Frozen is not supposed to be a guy where you, as you just said, right, they're not going to contest for a trophy at all this season. They're probably not going to be part of a semifinal at a tier 1 event at all this season. Odds are they won't make too many playoffs this season at tier 1 events, if even qualifying for most of them, because they have to climb their way through VIS. For Frozen could be a key part. Frozen could be a guy that elevated, I'd say, pretty much every single team in the world. So I refuse to accept that that's where FaZe is at right now. I don't care if we call them FaZe, if we call them the new FaZe, or the just in isolation.
Oh, you're setting the expectations based on the fact they are Frozen. Like, they should basically give him what his potential is your angle.
100%. Otherwise, let him fucking go. Like, I don't know if he's stuck in FaZe. I know he said that he wanted to keep, playing for FaZe, and there's nothing he'd like more to bring FaZe back to earth and bring FaZe back to a high level. Well, guess who said the exact same thing and then left a month after Carrigan, right?
True.
So that's what players do, and I'm sure he believed it when he said it, but I'm also sure he believes that he should join a better team when that offer comes a hand, and when he's allowed to do it. So keep that in mind when you listen to players. They may mean what they say in the moment, but that thing can change just like everyone else. One day you like ketchup, another one you don't. It's just the way we work as human beings. My issue is with this FaZe lineup, because I agree almost with you in terms of the individual. I'm honestly not on Jacob at all either. Like, this is not going to be another one of those where you get the entirety of Poland after you. He he's not cut for it. I was willing to give him a bit of leeway after the major when he showed glimpses, he showed potential. Oh, he was a great pistol round player. Maybe he needed a bit more experience. Then when Twistzz, took over as an in-game leader and more space was freed up, and you actually had the chance to give him more of the old roles that he had before when he was, arguably a star player in the lower tier scenes, he hasn't gotten any better. His entire tournament at the XCE Pro League thing, I didn't watch too many games. The one game I did watch was against Paravision, where he actually played well. But then I looked into all the other games and watched some highlights from those games, and he sucked ass in every single game for FaZe. He was by far the worst rated player. He was by far the weakest link within the lineup. And I'll be honest, if you're talent and if you're supposed to be the real deal, you've had a year now in FaZe almost. You've had time. You had two different in-game leaders. Yep. You've gotten some of your positions. Like I assume even the Polish fan must run out of excuses, because I can to some degree understand. Well, he's not playing his roles and he's inexperienced, and Brokey, Twistzz, Frozen, they take up too much space, and Kerrigan is not giving him the responsibility that he needs, blah, 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 blah. Well, what is your excuse now then? Like, you're running out of things you can try to activate this guy. I don't think he's a bad player, but I don't think he's cut out for he's not a player that's supposed to play with Frozen. Again, if I'm Frozen and I'm looking to my right and it's Jacob sitting there and it's J-Bone sitting there, albeit J-Bone may be the real deal and maybe he finds another level. Let's see about that. Or the Netu guy, as you said as well, if you're Frozen, like, come on, man. The guy next to me should be Nico. The guy to my left should be Monesi. Yeah, it should be top quality players, because that's where Frozen is at right now. So that's the thing that pisses me off, because I agree. I don't think we're going to speak too much about FaZe Clan, not as an organization, and I very much agree. They're not going to come back all of a sudden in a year's time to be a powerhouse again. That's going to take time if that happens. And that's going to require Twistzz, Frozen, and J-Bone for that matter as well, to over-deliver so they can attract better players in, and you can actually get rid of Jacob, you can get rid of Netu and sign better players. But that's the thing right now with FaZe Clan. Who's the wildest thought of imagination would be a top player or top prospect and want to join FaZe right now? It's a massive gamble if you're a player, so they can't really attract that kind of talent at the moment. So I'm pissed off in the sense that I want to see Frozen play on a better team. This is not about me wanting Frozen to Navi, which I would very much like. At this point, I just want Frozen on a better team. I want Frozen at tier 1 tournaments every single time, and I'll give the same leeway to Twistzz. I think Twistzz is way too good to be fighting to get invites through VIS to tier 1 tournaments. He should be a guaranteed stable at every single tournament. Now, I don't agree with everything Twistzz does or say. I also think, as you said, he's a very emotional guy, and sometimes he takes, at least I feel when you do your job as an analyst, like if you criticize him or his team, like he takes it personal, but I don't mind that. That means that he cares. It means that he's still invested into the game and there's emotions at stake. But I think as a raw player in isolation, Twistzz and Frozen is way too good to be fighting to just get invites to tournaments. It's almost a joke to me.
Now, as a gamer, been one my whole life, and you are gamers too, presumably, if you are listening to this. Just not an allusion to G2 there. That used to be the name of the G2, if people don't know. There's actually a product we're sponsored by now, which I can make a very obvious example for you, which is, I don't know about you, but first of all, isn't the mantra of the gamer one more game and you don't want to end on a loss and all that? We all know all these like mind tricks that we all get into. One of the problems with that, I'm sure everyone's been doing it, when you have that like stack of players or you've been on that like loss streak in Face It, the last thing you want to do is go, right, I need to take like an hour now for dinner, guys, or go. What you do instead is you just see like, is there anything around that I can just scrounge, like, some like crisps and potato chips for Americans, or is that, I don't know, like a candy bar there, or some old noodle. And by the way, leftovers is a classic. You just do that because you think I want to just be in the game. But here's the problem: when you do that, it will actually have an effect in the long run. Like, that is not actually a real food. It's not a complete meal. That's snacks. That's things you have on the side, or when you're on an aeroplane or before a movie or something. So our sponsor, Huel, actually, that is a complete meal. It has 27 essential vitamins and minerals, no artificial sweeteners, colours or flavours. I actually have drunk this one. It's the Huel Black Edition. This is the strawberry banana one. It has 35 grams of protein, 7 grams of fibre, and is under $5 a meal. And I've got to tell you, actually, yeah, it's pretty legit. Tastes good. I did actually try it literally for the premise here that it's a complete meal. I had it instead of lunch one day, and I wanted to see, would I in like 2 hours, which is what happens if you just have something simple, would I just then feel hungry again and just feel like, oh my God, I didn't eat. Actually, this did last quite a while. Like, first of all, when you drink it, you'll see from a drink, it's not just purely watery. It's got like a little bit of substance to it. So I would say it's actually fairly substantial. Also, that's the bottle version of it, that's 35 grams. They also have the powder, the Black Edition powder, which is 40 grams and mixes with water or milk in about 30 seconds. Then you just shake it a little bit. If you are a new customer, you can get 15% off online. Remember, Huel is spelled Huel. So limited time offer, make healthy eating simple. Get Huel today with my exclusive offer of 15% off online with my code LFN at huel.com/LFN. New customers only. Thank you to Huel for partnering and supporting our show. Okay, I've got an angle for you, Pimp, which doesn't have to be a big one. It's just a smaller one, actually, which is people always love to do that thing of like, what do you think of this new map? Or what should be done, right? And one of the biggest problems I always tell people, because every time they say this to me, I've been in the game a long time, is I tell them, how would I know? How would I know how it'll be played? Like, by the way, it's not. It doesn't even work to do this. I've played on my stream the new cache. Doesn't matter. Like, the pro players aren't going to play the way I play. I mean, I was probably doing like half the shit from 2015 or something, wasn't I? Like, the question I have is this, Pimp. I actually think the more interesting detail about cache being added for specifically this second season is that actually, if I look at the last few years, and especially the roster moves now, it does look like generally one of the people's answers to the Vitality and the Falcons of the world is people try to add more fragging power. And that's the area I think is interesting with the cache edition. It's not even just cache itself. It's just that to me, surely what we've got for this second season at a minimum is we've got a map pool that seems really skewed towards like fraggers, basically. Like the joke would be, I actually do think it is the teams like the Auroras of the world who should be looking at this and going like, okay, this can get us in the game, mate. We can get more wins on this than if, someone can veto us into an overpass or we have to ban that second and then go into an Inferno. So these are sort of the maps where you think about, like, if you think about cache, this is how you'll know if you're old school. That's like the most famous Nico map ever. You could do like an hour of Nico highlights there, simple. You think of any super player, Kenny S, they all have a million cache highlights, mate. What does Pimp think? More, not specifically only about cache, but about the map pool. What do you think about the map pool of season 2?
I think you're right. I think it does screw towards the fraggers, and I think that's the direction we're going. I also think it's based on how it's going to be played out, the new layout, et cetera, et cetera. It's a T-sided map, and I think more and more maps now are heading towards being T-sided. So if you compare the map pool today, the 7 maps we have today to the map pool, let's say 5, 6, 7 years ago, most maps were CT-sided, or at least they were leaning towards being CT-sided. Now, recently you've added Anubis, heavy T-sided map. You added Cash, who at least in history, were the most T-sided map in the history, and that's at the basis of removing Train, who historically speaking has been the most CT-sided map of all time, together with Nuke. So it is a game that is, I guess, developing in the direction that we want more T-sided maps. And as you said, T-sides are where fraggers come alive. That's where fraggers get to express their individual skill level. That's where you take duels against the CT side defending. I'd also say like this, Counter-Strike today compared to 5, 6 years ago, like the efficiency that you have with utility is so much higher today than it were 5 years ago. And I remember when I played Cash, one of the first times you actually started to see any map, where utility became a big part of the game plan was on Cash. You could literally destroy an entire bomb site if you knew where to Molotov, where to smoke, how to flash out certain positions, and you just feel like on CT side, you couldn't do jack shit, which is why you had a lot of 12-3 sites. You had a lot of sites, that went 10-5 for the T side, and you almost feel like if you got 5 rounds or 4 rounds in MR15 on CT side Cash, you'd be lucky, you'd be happy. You just needed to win the pistol, and you almost won the game. So I think given how efficient teams are today, how much we know about utility, how you see pretty much no teams ever anymore just waste a Molotov for no reason or throw a smoke just to throw a bit of a fake. There's always like a bigger meaning to it. I could really see Cash being a map where it takes a very high level of fragging capabilities on the CT side to disturb that. Like you need a turret almost that is able to stand in a Molotov or, walk himself out into an open position and get a multi-kill in a position where he's not supposed to get a multi-kill in order to take away some of that T initiative and take away some of the T rounds that is almost coming as a gift to you when you're playing proper Counter-Strike. So I very much agree. I think we are looking at a game that is becoming more and more frag heavy dependent. I hear all the pro players say it. Spoke to Dupree as well. He said it himself. Like just over the last 2 years, he felt like it's all about fragging. It's all about being a great individual. It's becoming even more about that. And I think the reason being is that you're almost maxed out on how efficient you can be with utility, with smokes, with flashes, with Molotovs. So you're always going to be in an uncomfortable position. And guess who's the best at getting frags and getting something out of uncomfortable positions? Those are the skilled individuals. Those are the players that are winning a duel they're not supposed to winning. Those are the players that is getting 2 kills when they're defending the B bomb side and does 2 when they're not supposed to get 2 kills. Those are the Rubs of the world. Those are the heavy guards of the world. Those are the players who maximize getting the most out of a shitty scenario. Even Spinks at times were excellent at doing that for MOUZ and back in Vitality. So I agree with you. I think it is a game that is developing to be more and more individual based. But I guess the counterintuitive reason for that is that it's actually becoming more and more tactical. So the more tactical the game becomes, the harder it is to play. And the harder it is to play, the more individual skill you need to actually elevate yourself out of the position where you're just standing in a Molotov, you're getting flashed, you now behind a smoke and you can't do anything, right? So unless you have incredible skill, unless you can maneuver like Monacy on the server or like the old Simple or like Heavy Guard, in a tough scenario, you're not really getting any kills. You're not really getting any impact. So the more tactical the game becomes, the more efficient you are with utility, the more skill you need to transcend to, I guess, race above that. And that's where you see the individual players become much better these days.
Yeah, the other thing for me as well, I always stress this, but I'll make the case here, is the reason why I want there to be like a mix of fragging maps, tactical maps, sort of hybrid ones in between, is because what I want was to be able to do in the game is not only for there to be many styles, like I actually think that's another complaint people have about a lot of modern sports. A lot of the sports have been like solved by maths, and so you've lost a lot of the flair and what makes them interesting. But I think more importantly, I think if you make the maps too fragging heavy, you just make the scene top heavy as well. Not only will all the fraggers end up on the top teams, but then it'll be the case that if you think of those teams that we all love that sort of walk the line, I think of like at the end of CSGO, the two I always pick is like Heroic and Ents. If you look at those lineups, there's not a lot of players there will ever be in a Hall of Fame, but they could contend with the best teams. They were in position to maybe win a major or steal one. Like it feels like in CS2, and especially with this map, none of those teams would ever do anything, mate. They'd be lucky to be top 10. Like you just won't win matches against the powers that are out there on these maps, because again, like a lot of fragging on T-side makes the game easier. It's less about tactics and all things we love in Counter-Strike. So if you go now to lastfreenation.com, we have launched LFN Premium. It's actually why you might have seen I did a Twitter thread where I said for this one episode, we're going to take a topic and do some Q&A at the end. By the way, even though for this one, you'll get it for free, in the future, the Q&A, because obviously there never was Q&A on Counterpoints before, that will go behind a paywall. It'll be like 15, 20 minutes most episodes, and it'll all be sourced by questions for you. For this one, I just did it for free so you can get a taste of it. On Twitter, anyone could have submitted a topic. But in the future, what you'll do is if you're a premium member, there'll be access via the website. Go check it out now. You'll be able to get on our Discord, and there'll be some channels there where you can actually submit them. If you're someone who already, by the way, for different shows, was like a Discord subscriber to do questions on like some of the insight in League of Legends or Hot Take Point Made where we can submit takes, you can still do that technically. It's just, I would say, why bother? Because basically the cost of the Discord sub isn't that far from the cost of this premium, and you just get way more perks for the premium. So you can go now to lastfreenation.com and let's see, wait there a second. Wait there 1 second. So go to lastfreenation.com and sign up for LFM Premium. It's $9 a month, or if you buy for a whole year, it's $90 a year, which is about $7.50 a month. If you pick Counterpoints at sign up, then your subscription will pay this show directly. Think of it this way. The sponsors help us keep the lights on, but actually people who subscribe help us remain independent and not have to count out to certain corporate or political entities where we can't say what we want. And there's also a 7-day money back guarantee. So lastfreenation.com. And also, let's say in the future, you didn't have a choice before. You wanted a topic to be on Counterpoint specifically, find out what Pimp thinks about it, what will we go back and forth on. Maybe it's a topic we disagree upon. Well, this is a way you can access that perk via both supporting the show and then also submitting a take if you are a premium member. There'll also be loads of other things, by the way, behind the scenes, as well as Q&A for most of the shows. I can tell you, for example, it was just announced on that movie review thing we do, where me and Richard and Monty review 4 movies, there's going to be a special 5th one that'll just be behind the paywall for people. Anyway, let's get on with the show. So, the topic I'm going to pick for this particular week is phrased, basically, it's one we probably wanted to discuss anyway, Pimp. So I thought this was phrased in an interesting way, though. Tyson CS says, will Magisk be able to get 2 Mongolians, Simple and Electronic, under his control? And isn't it too big of an ask for a new in-game leader, even if he did it for a short time previously? So what I like about this is a lot of people, I've even done shows myself, I've talked about BC game and obviously most of it actually just revolves around Simple and is he talks all that jazz as usual. Is Electronic a fraud? I think this angle's more interesting, and we've been talking about in-game leaders on this episode anyway. What about specifically Magisk? What do you think about how will he do as an IGL? And as pointed out, it's not like he's got the easiest task coming out the gate, but he has got some spicy players and some different cultures. So what are your expectations for Magisk?
Yeah, I'll be completely honest. I don't have any expectations because I think it's almost it's almost impossible to do if you're Magisk. Like, I know he's been an in-game leader before in Astralis, forced into the role. I remember the time when he first took over as an in-game leader, it was because Glaive needed a break in practice.
Yes.
Like, it was a bit of too much of a workload. They even had that thing where Sonic, before the whole coaching rule where coaches could speak at all times, Sonic would just be the caller of Astralis. Like, he would call at all times, and then Glaive would sometimes chimes in, when needed be. And then when Glaive was, I guess, exhausted and before he went on a sick leave as well, then Magisk took over for a little bit of time. And yes, he did okay, but let's be completely honest, I could have in-game lead that Astralis, and we could have done fine. Like, we could still be competitive. We could still win stuff. We could still go to tournaments and go into semifinals and finals. And that's not to take away anything from Magisk, but that's more so saying that Astralis team was so synergized. They've been together for such a long time. And as far as I've heard, and as far as I'm aware, it wasn't like Magisk came in and put his own mark on the in-game leading role. You could maybe think, okay, then he did it in a different way, or he would call in a different way, and all of a sudden Astralis would look a bit different as a team. The way I remember it, at least, it was just the same Astralis with a new voice calling the same thing, and the same players doing what they always had done. Dupree being an entry fragger, doing it to a high level, Supnix clutching out clutches when he was not supposed to win it, and Astralis being just very synergized whenever they play Counter-Strike. It wasn't like I remember Magisk came in and, gave me any thoughts of like, oh, here we have a future in-game leader who's going to be great, or he has his own vision, or he's going to do it differently than Glaive, or he's inspired by Glaive in this area, and then he was inspired by this guy in another area. So I don't think there's ever been like the whole case and whole desire for Magisk to be an in-game leader, to be completely honest. I think that was blown out of proportions by a lot of people who thought to himself, okay, I've seen that he was an in-game leader at one point, maybe he could do it again, but they never really put more thought or empathize into it. So first and foremost, I think it's I'll be honest, I think it's one of those where this is the last chance for Magisk. Like, he's well aware that as a player, not good enough anymore to be signed by a good team, not good enough anymore to play on a top 10 team. So if he wants to be part of any serious project or potentially any top team in the future, he had to transition into an in-game leader. And that's what you said as well. You don't mind Twistzz doing it, but at least wait until you're at the point where you're no longer sufficient enough to be a star player in a top 10 team, or you can no longer make the difference mechanically speaking for whatever reason, then maybe you transition into an in-game leader. And I think that's what Magisk has done right here. I think he's giving himself another chance at potentially, being relevant within Counter-Strike by transitioning into an in-game leader. But that's also why I have no expectations to that. I feel very strongly about the in-game leader role being a role you just can't pick up because you got no other choices. I hate the whole notion that, oh, we have a team of 4 players or 5 players. No one wants to be the in-game leader. I'll do it, because when has that ever worked out? It didn't really work out for anyone apart from Apex, who then decided to dedicate his entire career to that specific role. It doesn't work out for the riflers who's like, yeah, I can in-game lead for the next 6 months, and then I go back being a player, then I go back being an in-game leader, I go back being... It's not how that works, If you're an in-game leader, you have to be an in-game leader 100% of the time, and once you start to go back and forth between it, it's over. So as I understand it, this is not Magic's wanting to be an in-game leader. He would have done that a year before. He would have done that way before. This is him realizing as a player, unless I'm an in-game leader, I'm not getting signed to any team. Like, I cannot talk my way into any team as a player anymore. But if I come to MOUZ or if I come to BC Game and I say, hey, well, I was in-game leading Astralis and I think I have, pretty good chance of being a great in-game leader, then you look at Magisk as a player like, okay, as an in-game leader, you're not too bad. Like, you can frag, you can still be reliable, you can still, play some of the shitty positions on the CT side and still get the job done. And if you're a decent in-game leader, all of a sudden you add value to our team. Whereas if Magisk comes to MOUZ and Magisk comes to BC Game and say, yeah, I'm the player Magisk, I can play B and DOS 2 CTs, you're like, we can find other players who can do better and who's maybe, half your age and maybe cost 1/5 of what you're asking in terms of your salary. So I think it's more so that way around. So I'm willing to only be surprised. I have no expectations. I'm really setting the bar very, very low here for Magisk and BC Game in that department. And I think there's a realistic chance that he can be somewhat decent as an in-game leader. But as I said, I feel strongly about players who do it for the reason that I just described right here, where they didn't do it because they wanted to. They didn't do it because Magisk is envisioning himself being a top-tier in-game leader the next 3 years in his career. I think he's at the point where he's aware that either he signs with BC Game as an in-game leader right now, or he's never signing with any other Counter-Strike team ever again. It'll be the same thing as if KGB 5 years ago or 7 years ago all of a sudden decided to be an in-game leader so he could have one more stint at a top team, just for that top team to find out that he was never going to be a great in-game leader. I fear the same could be the same here with Magisk.
Now, I have actually already done a short episode of Feed the Trolls where we went really in depth on this topic. And actually, to give a bit of a change, because usually I look at like really the optimistic side because I think Simple's one of the all-time greats. I'd love him to be relevant again. Actually, on that show, we go through almost every negative aspect about this move and try and really drill into it. So I'm not going to do that. You can go watch that show separately. All I'll say is this, right? I will say there is one detail about Magisk IGLing in the online period that people don't seem to consider. You actually touched on it there, but you didn't state explicitly. People forget, right? When they used to have Glaive and they were in their peak, one of the coolest stories I heard, and I always thought this has to be part of why Glaive was like an absurdly good fragger for an IGL who was a great tactical IGL, is the story goes, it was confirmed by Zonic, that actually in scrims, sometimes Zonic would call and Glaive would just play his spots and frag, and then the idea was it took some of the mental load off him so that then he could do both in the officials, right? If people don't know, that already implies Zonic could IGL in his own team, and then people forget, during the online era, the coaches could just IGL and talk if they wanted anyway. We don't know if he did when Magisk was there, but I'll give you the obvious example. Isn't the reason everyone hated on Gambit that the second they got to LAN, everyone was like, oh, wait, did the Nafani guy not call? Was it just Groove behind him the whole time calling the games? Because online they were magical, mate. They were rotating everywhere. But then when they got to LAN, they were a bit gimmicky as a team. They were just playing off firepower. So first of all, I don't think you can just look at the online period and go, that means Magisk is definitely going to be a good IGL. My problem, though, is it's more like you're saying. It's more, it depends where his head is at. It's actually not about ability, in my opinion. I actually am shocked, genuinely, he didn't make this move years ago. In fact, what's really crazy to me is, I don't know about you, but when they actually did that move where he left Vitality after winning the major and went with Zonic to Falcons, I even thought, is that what the point of this move is? That actually he himself has decided, look, I'm falling down the pecking order in these teams and it's getting more. It's like, let's be real, I'm like the support player, basically. Actually, maybe I just become an IGL. It's a classic Danish move anyway. You transition from those sorts of roles to IGL and then that's the rest of your career, like you say. So my issue is, if I were him, I would have done this like 2 or 3 years ago. I wouldn't have waited until now. I'm actually also shocked when they fired Snappy, they didn't consider this move. But this is why I definitely agree with you about relevancy, though. It's why actually that rumor that he was going to join MOUZ, not as the IGL, I think that's his last chance ever to be in a relevant team, not as an IGL. Yep. So I'm with you. If he ever wants to be, which is I think the real reason they keep playing, if you're at that level and you've accomplished that much, you want to be in the mix. You want to be at the major. You want to be in the playoff. You want at least the feeling of like, I'm still a player. You don't want to be the guy who goes out in stage 1, or you're just at the bad PGLs and you make a quarterfinal. That's people like Magisk won't keep playing if that's the case, even with all the money. Like a lot of them will just go and do something else in life. So my main issue is I'd need to know what he thinks about a Pimp. If it's really true that he's just doing it out of desperation, that's one thing. If instead it's like he actually assessed his career and was like, look, I've thought about this in the past and now is just the most obvious time to do it, I could actually see him being good. I actually think he has, like, what's funny is even some of the negative things about him. You know, when he was young, everyone used to say he went all tomato faced and he was a rager. I've heard he's a bit like that as a teammate, but I actually think that can be a positive. I actually think if you're someone who constantly holds people accountable, as long as you're right, and as long as you put in the homework, that can actually be the sign of a good leader, by the way. I tell you what, there's some leaders I've loved in CS. Examples would be like Daps, JT. The problems I have with those leaders is I get the sense they're kind of a bit timid, you know what I mean? Even if they actually think, even if they did know better than their star player, maybe they don't really want to argue, you know what I mean? Let's just split the difference. Yeah, okay, you do that. Yeah, sort of. I actually think that's like that. It's a lot harder to believe in an IGL like that than it is one that's like, look, I think this is the way it goes. I want players who do it this way. Now, the obvious thing as well is, as I said in that, you can go watch that episode. There's a million ways this could blow up with the Mongolians, with Electronic, with some, but I'll give you a little bit of light I don't think people are actually stopping and thinking about. Even though people are framing it as, well, Magisk's the odd one out, isn't he? You've got the 2 players who played together in Na'Vi. You've got 2 players, and then it's just Magisk. Yeah, but you could also argue that could actually streamline the team pretty quickly. Simple Electronic played together for years. Mazzinho and Senzu played together for years. By the way, those are even like aggressive pairings in their teams. It's not even like you've got like pure support Lurker and the entry fight. These are actually players that could even play like a 2-man game, as the old saying goes. Joke is here, this could be fucking Overdrive in this spot. If shout out Nostalgia one time if you know the reference from like 12, 13 years ago. This is what he used to do, basically. You get real players and you just tell them like go B, and then they just do some FPL shit where one jumps on the corner and the other one frags him, you know. Like I could almost see that even working. So the bigger issue for me on this one is I don't actually think Magisk is the sort of fulcrum that decides if this succeeds, Pimp. I actually think a lot more of it is on things like, is Senzu going to be world class with Mazzinho in a small team? Is Electronic going to be relevant? Is Simple actually? Because here's the one thing, I actually still think it's all on Simple, bro, and here's why. Because I'm sorry, no one else seems to agree with me much, bizarrely. I think Simple plays like he doesn't trust his teammates the whole time in CS2, mate. That wasn't the old Simple. The reason why I didn't mind the old Simple going crazy at someone who made a mistake is because he put himself out there in the game, mate. And if he went for some mega aggressive peak or was left in an impossible 1v3, he almost won. I used to think that's fine that you then go, what the fuck are you doing there? I basically could have won us around there. If you did it, that's legitimate because you're telling someone what you need from them. And if they give you it, you will deliver. I think in CS2, he's a lot more baity and he's a lot more sort of like, I don't want to have bad numbers or, ooh, I'm not getting into this game. So you know what? Actually, maybe I'll let the crazy guy run around the corner like sort of like 0.5 seconds earlier than I should have done, you know, and I should have followed him up. And he's baited. Fuck it, I'll just back off, save my AWP, and then I still have like 2 kills in a round, which is like empty calorie. So I actually still think it's on Simple, mate. I still think if Simple dials in and gets his shit together, this is why actually I go the other way. I say this is Simple's last chance. I think if if he's not going to do it with this roster, mate, he's never going to be a top player in CS2. He's not interested in it because if I actually do, even though it's fucked as a fan, as a human, I can understand why if you play a bunch of scrims with like fucking Aragon and Crazy and you just see that you get tooled by anyone in the top 30, yeah, that's going to sap your motivation. It just is. I know fans go, just try harder. If you're out there as a fan, you can't do that at work. You can't do that at school. You can't go 100% at all times in every scenario. I mean, I'll give you the obvious analogy if you're a kid. Have you ever been to university? It's famous in university. They give you group projects, right? Where one person in your group might be a dickhead who does no work. Do you know why they do that? To let you simulate office environments. Because in an office also, you might have the guy who does the bare minimum. And you at the end of the quarter, your boss goes, well, we had to get this project done. It doesn't matter that you had to do more. The point is, that's to teach you. The problem in this case is, I think Simple's the guy where, at least in the modern day, he has to have people he trusts to do it. So I'm actually not putting it on Magisk. I'm putting it on Simple. There you go.
I like that.
I'm putting the fire to his feet, you know.
Yeah, I like that angle. I think you answered the question yourself, though, for Magisk, because I agree with you. If his desire was to be an in-game leader, if that's your notion that, you know, it depends on where his head is at in terms of if he's going to be a great in-game leader or not, he should have done it when they got rid of Snappy. Like, he should have demanded almost in Falcons that he was going to be the in-game leader. Yeah. And I think it speaks volume that Sonic kept Magisk in Falcons for a long, long time. He didn't want to get rid of him up until the point where it was a no-brainer for everyone to see that he was the one who had to go. I think Magisk had chances and probably could have demanded, you know, or persuade Sonic into being, okay, give me a go as an in-game leader. Like, I'm going to do it right now. If you didn't do it back then, if you didn't see the writing on the wall in Falcons that he was the next one to go, if he didn't transition into an in-game leader, then either Magisk is very, very, very stupid, which I don't think is the case at all, or he's, you know, having a very tough time handling in his own career, which I also don't think is the case. I don't think he wanted to be an in-game leader. I don't ever think that was a burning desire inside his stomach, because he would have done it back then. So that's, you know, part of the reason why I don't think that's the case, to be completely honest. And I also very much agree with your point, let alone from, you know, Simple as a player, from an individual standpoint. I'll tell you this, you know, Simple can be the best thing ever to happen to any Counter-Strike team in the world, still, potentially. I agree, there's always that potential. Like, it doesn't matter if you haven't been on the top of your game for some years. He has that unique skill set to him, you know. I'm almost like willing to say, like, look at Lionel Messi right now. Like, he could literally be gone from the game, give him 6 months, get back into shape, and he could do the same thing he's doing for Argentina right now as a football player. I have the same belief in Simple, because they're just extraordinary in that sense. But he's also the player, just like Lionel Messi. Now, obviously, Messi doesn't seem to have any attitude problem whatsoever. Everyone, you know, looks up to him as he's the god, and everyone is willing to kill for him, die for him. That's the thing with Simple, though. He doesn't have that same aura around him. I don't think people are willing to kill for Simple. I don't think people are willing to go into death for Simple. I don't think he has that attitude or the same charisma or the same personality where he's, you know, rattling the entire squad and you know, creates an environment where all 4 players are willing to die for Simple. Because I think that's what's needed for him. I think he needs to feel valued. I think he needs to feel that he's the one in control, that if he's playing well, then not only do they get to tournament, no, they go to the playoff, or they maybe even go into the semifinals. So you need to apply that pressure where he's like, he has to have a feeling that, just like he had in Na'Vi, just like he had throughout his entire career, that he's the one in charge. You know, if he's playing a lot of Counter-Strike and if he's playing well, then they're going to win stuff. But that requires the other 4 players to buy into that. And I don't think he, from what I've seen, you know, and from history, ever since he left Na'Vi, he doesn't seem to have that ability to rattle up the team around him in the same sense that Messi's doing, where everyone is willing to kill for him. So maybe he needs to take a bit of inspiration from that. You know, maybe he needs to be the guy that finds a way to make sure that everyone is willing to go into death for him. Because I think when Simple has that, I guess, urgency on his shoulders, and when he's feeling that he's the one in charge, like he's the one deciding whether or not they're going to win games or whether or not they're going to be a great team, well, they can be a great team, and he can be a great player still. But as you also said, he can be the guy that if he's not willing to do it, or if he feels just slightly demotivated, or if the other 4 guys are actually, playing at 100% and trying to make it work, but they feel that Simple is a little bit off, or he's playing a little bit more Dota than he's probably supposed to, etc., etc. He can also be the guy who ruins the entire team before it even gets off. He can be the guy that if you were to send a rocket into the space, right, he'd be the guy that makes it explode on ground before it even takes off. So it is up to Simple in my book as well. I don't think it comes down to whether Magisk is a great in-game lead or not. It comes down to whether Simple wants it or not. And at the end of the day, he's in control of BC Games' fate, and he's always been.
There's one here that says, will BetBoom, who obviously had, if you don't know, Flamus was just a stand-in at the major, and he's no longer in their team. In fact, he's off going to loan to other teams now. There's no Flamus anymore. And if you saw the XSE Power Tournament thing, they don't look that great, actually, with the original lineup again. So they look like they're a little bit scuffed, right? The question is, before September, will they make a roster move? As you can see, if you went back into June, people thought, yes, definitely. Now it's down all the way to 43%. So at the moment, the traders say it doesn't happen before September. Does BetBoom, because to be fair, if you saw the news, the CEO of BetBoom just claimed that the buyout, he did want Flamus apparently, but the buyout was just way too high. Does it happen before September? Do they make a roster move? Should they?
I don't think they will, and I don't think they should. I think they should give this lineup a proper chance. They've been playing with so many stand-ins, Flamus in and out, Siren in and out. Yeah. I don't know. I think BetBoom is a good team. I think they have the solid foundation. I think they're gonna give this squad a chance to actually commit themselves and play good Counter-Strike. I understand why the first tournament XE is gonna be a bit shaky after a player break and after the major, but I don't think they'll make a roster change before September. However, I do think they'll make one before October if it doesn't work out before September. So it's a little of a timing issue here.
Right, mine's easy. I actually do think they should make a move, but I also don't think they will. Here's the reason why. It's actually a scaled down version of the MOUZ discussion. I just don't think this organization's head or finances are in a place where they want to spend giant amounts in order to come like second in the world. I think that most teams can't do that. You have to think of it like sports. There's a range of what's plausible for you, and then you try and do good business within that range. So I think, unfortunately, even though I think they should, because what I saw at the major was wonderful. It was a Cinderella run that was really exciting. I wish I could see that again, but to be fair, if it also can't be Flamus, I don't really give a fuck about you signing some K27 player as the 5th one in Gamlat. So here's the thing, I imagine there'll still be a team that's in group stages and could cause an upset and maybe make one little playoff appearance and then get eliminated, but actually I don't think they will, Pimp. I'm with you, I don't think they will. Okay, we will now do the subscriber exclusive in the future Q&A section. This time it's from your tweets. In the future, as I said, go check the ad. It'll be via the paywall, and you'll do it via Discord, and we'll obviously read out your name when you do it. So here's one. Gadge says, are you surprised that none of the top 5 teams, Falcons, Vitality, Spirit, Na'Vi, Fury, made changes this offseason, and was that the right move?
Not surprised yet, to be completely honest. I don't think there's a big reason for Vitality to make a roster change, for Falcons obviously to make a roster change, even for Furia, committed with Fallen. They're gonna make a roster change, and we know that roster change is gonna be at the end of the season with Fallen. So not really. The only one, as we said, is Na'Vi. Like, is Na'Vi gonna make the change or not? I think they're still. I think probably internally they know if they will now, but whether or not it comes out public is the big question mark. But no, I'm not really surprised, because Falcons ramped it up, Spirit got better. Furia got better as well from the beginning of the season. So as long as the team is moving in the right direction, the incentive to make a roster change is not really that high.
Right. Gamer152. This is a bit of an old one, but we'll see where your memory goes. He says, Fnatic 2015 to 2016. Why did they break up? And do they all deserve a slap for breaking that team up? What do you think? Should they not have broken that team up?
No, they shouldn't. But then again, I don't remember exactly what happened internally. But that was the time where some of them went to Godsend, I think. Like, the core of the team split up in 2 different teams. So some stayed in Fnatic, some went to Godsend. And then they realized that, all of a sudden we're both worse off, and we're not doing well in Godsend, we're not doing well in Fnatic. And then they remerged and got back together. So I would assume it was some internal conflicts, whatever, egos, players wanting more spotlight on themselves, you name it, being young, immature, as we like to say it. Don't blame them at all, because let's be honest, back in 2015, it wasn't the same professionalism as you have today. Do they deserve a slap for not doing it? Now, I think they learned a valuable lesson, and they got back together, and they had, most of them a pretty cool career, to be honest. If you look at JW, at Olaf Meister, you name it, they can be proud of what they've achieved, Flusher for that matter as well. So now it's just part of the course.
No, my problem is in context, no, they actually were fine to do the move and they don't deserve a slap. Here's why. Because even though he'll forget that after Godsent, they remade the exact lineup for 2017. It's just, it was trash by 2017. Here's the real problem, right? Is people will forget in 2016, the thing that actually derailed that squad when they got rid of Pronax and brought in Dennis and won the 6 tournaments was Olaf Meister. I believe he originally had the hand injury. And then you remember years later in FaZe, he had, I think it was actually something with like a family member died that like rocked him in some way he took to. I will say this, there's actually been 2 all-time great teams. It was the FaZe 2018 team and this Fnatic team that unfortunately, for whatever reasons, probably legitimate, Olaf Meister leaving did sort of stop these teams, because I do think you have a window, mate. You don't have 3 years where you can be the best. You probably have a year. In this case, yes, maybe they tanked like 6 months to 1 year of an extra period of time. But then the last thing I'll say is this, and this is totally understandable if you knew esports back then. One of the things that actually was very impressive to me in 2015 when Fnatic won everything was actually at the time, you'd already had these big North American orgs that were from COD and from LOL come in and they pumped the salary market to the heavens. We went from people getting like 5,000 euros a month to like the best teams are getting 20,000 euros a month. And I can tell you, Fnatic was not one of the ones that's contract said 20,000 euros. So actually one thing that was quite cool with Fnatic is, even though they actually didn't have to do this, the law would have said, the contract says that's what I owe you. Actually, Fnatic did used to give them pay bumps as they won the tournaments, I've heard, and like get them closer to the market value. But here's the problem. People won't know, and there's no time on this episode to explain this, maybe ask in the future. At the time, what you guys hate about the Saudis was actually being done by Nicola Nyholm and Refresh. They were trying to simultaneously have the tournament circuit with Blast, their own teams. I said teams there. It was Astralis, it was Heroic, it was Godsend. And so what happened, as far as I know, is they went to Pronax, because that's the part you forget about this story, is Pronax had already been kicked out of Fnatic. They went to Pronax and they were like, look, you've had basically like a pretty good career, but you're not going to be in a top team now. If you make a new team, we're going to call it Godsend, you will own part of this team. So you won't just be a player anymore. This is like, a plan for the future. Maybe one day you're a coach, maybe one day you're the GM, maybe you're just an owner one day. And I can tell you there's a lot of pro players I think have wasted their money and opportunities in esports. So even though this didn't work, at the time, I can sort of understand why that seemed like an attractive project of like, let's sort of rebuild a bit like the Fnatic thing. But we own the org and we can get paid the top salaries and we can be the ones who run the org and we can have, players love the idea of having control. So I don't blame them for trying that, even though now with incredible hindsight, we know that wouldn't work out and it probably couldn't have worked out. At the time, that seemed like something that actually, that could have been a genius move, where now we're all saying they're all super smart and they all have like millions and millions of dollars and that's a top 5 team in the world. Okay, here is a question. It's one of those ones where a fan just doesn't even attempt context. He just says, Spirit minus Zontix plus Magines from BetBoom.
Fuck. Role-wise wouldn't work out.
Not tonight,
no. I'd say minus Tenea plus Magnes at that point.
Yes.
You'd potentially get the best of both worlds. I'm not sold on Tenea yet. Tenea has potential. He's a great player. He just hasn't found his footing in Spirit. I think Magnes is legit, but, and honestly, if I played Counter-Strike as was it Football Manager and there was no consequences to my move and I just played it as a game, I'd do it in a heartbeat. It's worth the risk. It's worth the gamble. So keep Suntix for now or find a different guy to replace Suntix. But minus Tenea plus Magnes, I could see that be interesting.
Oh, if I didn't say the name, someone called Winter Go Fast. By the way, I also think it's not worth the move, because the problem is all you're doing there is putting big names on the team. But the other reason why I don't want that move to happen for real is I think you just kill the career of Magines, because everyone would remember he wasn't that good. Because here's the problem. It's like taking a striker, but you're now asking him to be like a fucking right back, mate. Like, that's insane what you're asking him to do. So not only would you tank his career, but if you promote a player like that, in my opinion, it's why I have the problems with MOUZ Pimp. You're supposed to give them the roles that they're really good at, because that's why they earned your attention to get promotion. You don't, as I just say, take a really promising fucking striker and put him at fullback. Like, if you do that, it doesn't matter on paper. Look at this, I've got all these. No, you will just have a worse right back at that point in time, and you'll never get the quality of this. So I'm with you. It's extreme, but this is why you have to understand roles in CS. If you actually want him in the team, I'm with you. You take someone like today, mate. You're taking some big dog out, and you're saying Magines isn't just going to join the team. He's going to be one of our best players. So I don't even think that's a great gamble right now. I'd just stick with today if I were them. Yeah. Okay, what about this one? Silnix says, are there any big winners in this Roster Mania? So does who won this Roster Mania to you? Who was the biggest winner for you?
I have an idea, and I have a feeling we're going to discuss that in the next episode in depth. But I'd say Aurora to me is the big winners. I think they've revamped their lineup. They've gone international, and sometimes for teams when they do that, it takes a bit of time before it actually sticks and becomes interesting. Look at Astralis, where they've been international the first time. It took a couple of roster changes, and they're still in the process of making it work. I think Aurora have done great in signing Ash as a coach, great in signing Kixon as an in-game leader, and great in signing some of the individuals they have as well. So I'll be honest, I think Aurora is the biggest winner so far of the transfer season, but I want to go more in depth with that maybe in the next episode.
I'm with you. We'll definitely put a pin in that. I actually agree. I actually think they're one of the bigger off-season winners I've seen in a while because it sort of came under the radar. There was other rumours, and then suddenly they ended up. I actually think they got the absolute max of what they could have gotten at both positions. And I'll go. This is where I know people think, Magic here. Yeah, look at the fucking games. Have you ever seen him in playoffs? Fuck you if you say that. Like you're a fucking bad CS lover if you say I'm a Magic hater. I am a Magic hater, but that's actually just his personality. If you haven't noticed, I'm brilliant at talking up people. I think Jail's a fucking moron. Tell you what, he was a pretty good player a few years ago. So what I will say is this. I actually think they have a real chance to go for it. And they can be like third or fourth best team now. So I'm actually kind of pumped about this. I think these are great gambles. Okay, along similar lines, LH, that's just what his name is, says, who griefed this Roster Mania and deserves to be flamed? So is there a team who fucked it up and we should give them a bit of stick?
I don't know. Not quite yet, I'd say. We already discussed the MOUZ one. I don't think they fucked it up by PR. I can understand the gamble, but it is to me a step back, in terms of aspirations and where we expect MOUZ to be. Who else? I mean, honestly, just to stay on record and stay on track, I'd say Na'Vi if they don't make a roster change. I think that would be. I think that'd be bad, So a change, or I guess the lack of change, could also be the worst roster move in this season. So I'm really eyes peeled on Na'Vi to see if they do it. The longer we have to wait, the more I'm inclined to think that they won't. But personally, from the outside, I think that's a mistake.
No, I will actually just say, I think the obvious one, it was discussed at the episode, FaZe Clan, and here's why, Pimp. Because I was told by FaZe Clan publicly, and I won't say who, but privately, I even talked to a top person in FaZe Clan, and they told me that they have loads of money, mate, and that they can sign players and all that. And then it's like, well, you know what? Then you're fucking morons. You are really stupid and you don't understand Counter-Strike. Because not only did you not sign top players, the top players all went to other teams, including some of them as fucking free agents. So, and listen, if you lie, well, unless I can prove you're lying, I have to pretend it's true, don't I? So if that's true, you are just incompetent. What's funny is, I'll just say this if they're listening. If you're listening, you dumb fuck, it's like the thing I said about Cyclone. If we know you don't have money, we will actually accommodate that in our contextual opinion. We won't say you should go and sign fucking some top player. We will understand that you can't do it and we'll know that you're working with a budget. But if you tell us that you've got all the money, then you're just the dumbest fox in the world. So there you go. You tanked the off-season. Like, you have put Frozen into hell and now he's even doing things where it's like, by the way, I don't even believe, Pimp, as a quick aside, that whole interview comment is saying, like, I want to be in FaZe. What he's saying there is, I know I'm in fucking prison, but I'm on a life sentence, motherfucker, so don't give me hope. Just let me fucking read a book in the corner and work out with weights. Like, I can't do anything else. That's what I think he meant by that comment about, like, stop saying basically, like, Na'Vi, Frozen, or whatever the fuck. Right, last question. Obviously, we're going to do a short version, because we've done this already on episodes, so let's just get... I think it's more of an update, Pimp. Benjamin Hope says, the joke is, you obviously wrote this, he put, who have the best era, Astralis or Vitality? So who had the best era, Astralis or Vitality? Has it changed? Is it Vitality? Is it Astralis? Who are you going with?
It's still Vitality, no doubt, for my money. Like, even if Vitality were to never win a tournament again, even if this team were to implode in a couple of months because they all, start hating each other for whatever reason, Vitality will go down in history as the greatest Counter-Strike team of all time, in my opinion.
Yeah, I will just say this. This is something actually I might do content in the future. Maybe it'll be a talk show topic. I actually think people are being too simplistic because they're doing that thing where they go, but Vitality played worse teams. Like, yes, because they beat them all. That's why you think they're worse. Like, you're just judging based on wins and trophies. The real problem is, by definition, the most dominant player ever is going to make all his opponents look shit, isn't he? Because they never get to beat him. So I actually think Astralis almost did the perfect way to dominate the scene completely and be way number one. But still, it felt like every two tournaments they let someone else win one. They didn't let them, they just did. And that kept you feeling like, ooh, the story's still interesting. Ooh, have they gone off? And so it's because they kept returning to the top like 7 times in a row. Vitality had to do it like twice so far. That's why it feels like everyone's whacked. So the real discussion in the future would be, take those two teams out. Let's actually compare FaZe from 2018 versus like MOUZ from 2025. That would be a more interesting discussion to me. But That will be for a future day, as will the next Q&A. And by the way, the next Q&A will be way longer. We just had a limited time frame on this one. Obviously, we used to do 1 hour episodes. This is almost 1 hour 30. So tune into the next Counterpoints and subscribe to Last Free Nation Premium if you'd like to ask a question or submit a topic for that. And we will see you on the next one.